This video contains spoilers for Spider-Man 2. Insomniac has just released Spider-Man 2 and I've been looking forward to this game all year. I thought Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales were alright. The fighting and swinging mechanics were great, but I just wish that the games were longer. Even after the original game got the Turf Wars DLC, I didn't like how the story got split up into 4 parts, breaking any immersion by the time the story was getting somewhere. However, all the build up for this game made it worth it. The storylines with Kraven, Venom, and Mr. Negative was top notch. That being said, let's dive right into it. With there being 2 Spider-Man, the game jumps between Peter and Miles for the main story, allowing you to choose either or during free play. Both of them were handled well. Peter definitely got more attention as the main Spider for the game, but Miles did have his moments to shine. The game sort of splits itself into 2 routes, which I'll call the Kraven and Mr. Negative routes, each focusing on a different Spider-Man before reuniting into the Venom route. I'll cover the story in a minute, but other areas of the game that have been improved from the previous. First off, the new equipment and Venom abilities breathed some much needed life into combat. The addition of battle partners who could perform finishers with you were great. I only wish we had more options for directing our partners, maybe not so much in controlling them, but that would be welcomed. Now, I was worried at first that Miles would be the funner, quote-unquote, spider to play as during free roam and battle, but once Peter got the symbiote, I recognized each had specific elements that catered towards them. I surprisingly had more fun playing as Peter than Miles. Also, the new travel methods for gliding/fighting effectively made fast travel pointless. There are wind tunnels that cause you to fly at basically super speed, eliminating any use for fast travel. It's not even hyperbole, I think I used fast travel like 3 times. Lastly, the MJ missions have been improved. Seems Insomniac listened to the criticisms and made MJ a combat character in their own right, using both a stun gun and a sonic blaster. She's basically a third-person shooter, making her later missions feel like they were ripped out of a zombie apocalypse game. But that's enough about combat, let's move on to the story. The game opens with Kraven finishing his latest hunt, lamenting on how nothing gives him a proper challenge. Kraven is searching for an opponent who will give him a worthy death, someone who could hunt even him. This causes him to go to New York to hunt the supervillains. The game does a great job of making him seem like a threat off the bat and subvert your expectations by not making him solely a Spidey villain. He's more interested in hunting the villains while Spider-Man is just an afterthought to him. I like how they brought back Spider-Man's reformed villains and incorporated them into the story. Because Insomniac Spider-Man was older and had already walked through some of his roster, having Kraven force these villains out of retirement was a great way of incorporating them into the story. First off, Black Cat and Tombstone seemingly gave up on crime in the last game, but Kraven's hunter made them go on the run and need protection. Even if they aren't enemies that you need to fight, seeing their inclusion in the story was a great way of building up Kraven as an almost unstoppable force. The prologue battle with Sandman was a result of Kraven making Marco's daughter going missing, and Dr. Connor's retransformation to the Lizard was because Kraven recreated the serum. It does a great job of painting Spider-Man's rogue gallery as regular people with unfortunate circumstances, being feared by the public when they were just trying to defend themselves. Oh yeah, Mysterio's here too, but no one cares about him. But what shocked me the most was Kraven actually getting some kills under his belt. You would think that he'd kill random people in the game to build himself up, but no, he outright kills Scorpion, while other hints point to him killing Vulture and the Shocker. When he can just casually kill 2 named villains off screen, you know this man's serious. Especially since he kills Peter almost effortlessly, which yeah, that caught me off guard. Now, it's revealed that Harry Osborn has the Venom symbiote and it's staving off his weakness. What his weakness is, the game doesn't say, but when Peter is dying, he transfers the symbiote to him, healing Peter's wound. But the symbiote cannot be readily removed, so Peter needs Dr. Connor's help in removing it. And my quick thoughts on Harry Osborn being Venom, I actually don't mind it because I would rather them do a Venom plotline with someone close to Peter than someone they're just going to introduce at last seconds. Because this Peter doesn't know an Eddie Brock. I don't want him to meet a stranger, wrong that stranger, and then, oh, we suddenly have Venom. I think it's much more effective having Harry Osborn being the Venom because he's actually close to Peter. Now before we continue, I want to look at Miles' perspective on the game. Miles is in a weird position. With the release of the Spider-Verse, Miles has become the Spider-Man for a new generation, but he's also not the main protagonist of this game. The main storyline focuses more on Peter and his relationship with Harry, causing Miles to be ignored and put second both by the cast and the story. This brings up the question, how do you develop his character and not have him be in Peter's shadow? Enter Mr. Negative, the man who killed his father in the first game, and was kidnapped by Kraven. Miles' story goes past just not killing Martin Lee, but also finding his own identity. With his college essay due, Miles has to figure out who he is without Spider-Man. Given that his life is less stressful than Peter's and the people in his life are more supportive of him being a superhero, Miles has to fit that mold of looking past his beef with Martin and looking towards the future. While most of his missions don't seemingly tie into the Venom plotline, his mission builds introspection into his unique character, proving he's not a Peter clone. Earlier in the game, he almost lets Martin drown to death, and later in the game when he's kidnapped by Kraven, gets the opportunity to kill him without any risk of the wider populace finding out. However, Martin ends up going into Miles' psyche and realizing his sins were just as bad as Norman's, drawing a parallel between Norman's experiments leading to the death of Martin's parents and Martin killing Miles' dad at City Hall was a great way of kickstarting his quote-unquote redemption arc. This also leads into Miles sparing Martin and helping him escape, putting the morals his parents and Peter taught him into use, and helping him escape showed his growth. He grew not only as a hero but as a person, putting revenge behind him. To add on, I like how Miles doesn't forgive Martin Lee. Miles outright says he won't forgive him because at the end of the day, his father is dead because of him. In the same breath, Miles mentions he won't let his beef with Martin hold him back anymore, making a contrast to the route of revenge Martin went down. That shows personal growth and maturity on Miles' behalf. Also, I like how Miles' actions indirectly lead into Peter being saved, not once, but twice. But that's enough stalling, let's get into the Venom storyline. Any expectations I had for the story were blew out of the water with Venom. I didn't think we'd get to play as Venom off the cuff. His battle style was so violent and unhinged. Peter and Miles have aggressive combat maneuvers, but Venom literally plays like he's in God of War. Greek God of War. At one point, he literally snaps a dude's spine in half. It was just so raw. A game that doesn't want you killing people, letting you kill upwards of 50 people so casually, and ending his rampage with biting Kraven's heads off? Marvelous! Also, now that I think about it, Kraven kind of won. He wanted someone strong enough to kill him, and he got his wish. But going back to the story, Harry's back in Peter's life and tries to reconnect with him. Seeing both of them sneak through Midtown High while they were younger and becoming superhero teams in the modern day was a great touch. The game had to sell you on their friendship, with this being Harry's true introduction into the cast, and they did great. Little moments like the chat they had at the Coney Island Festival really allowed their dialogue to bounce off one another. It was also nice just seeing them be bros, unlike the movies where there's almost no chemistry between the characters or their actors. It makes the transfer of the symbiote more believable, and the urgency to save Harry's life more understandable. It also makes the deterioration of Peter's relationships more impactful. I'm desperately trying to get the symbiote back to him to doing anything to keep it for himself. The symbiote didn't make him mean in the stereotypical sense, it just made Peter selfish, looking out only for himself instead of his girlfriend and his dying best friend. And this ties back into what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. He's not just a hero, but a person underneath with people who care about him. His relationships are what make him human, they're what make him Peter. So seeing everyone come together to bring him back from self-destruction was a stellar story writing. There's a bit of a contrast between the games and the Spider-Man movies. In the Spider-Man 3 movie, Peter has to pull himself out of the suit after realizing he hurt everyone who cared about him. But here, it's people who care about him that lead to the suit getting removed. It's a small difference that goes a long way in showing how important the bonds we form are. Especially since it was Miles that was the driving force behind the suit's removal. With Harry being around, Peter hadn't been talking or hanging out with Miles, not keeping up with their relationship. This emulated the problem the comics currently have, where they can meet up anytime, but don't. They should be interacting, but don't. But when Peter was at his darkest moment, Miles disregarded his own problem to prioritize Peter's safety. The fight between Miles and Peter's happens immediately after Miles' fight with Mr. Negative and Peter's fight with Kraven. Miles could have done a number of things at this point. He could have tied up Kraven so he couldn't escape, or he could escape himself because he'd basically been trapped there for over a day. But instead he turned to Peter, almost like he was trying to say, "And now you." That was what popped through my head while watching this scene. Seeing Miles doing and saying everything he could to get Peter back, seeing their brother-like relationship in this game develop was great. The Spider-Verse movie had Peter and Miles in a mentor-mentee, father-son-ish relationship, but I think I prefer the brotherhood they have here. It felt genuine, it felt earned. It was sort of like family always being there for you, being conducted in this way. It becomes apparent in the final battle of Harry/Venom. Venom says something along the lines of, "You and I were best friends, now we get to be brothers." But Venom's actions indirectly made Peter and Miles grow closer, truly developing that brother-like bond. Venom thought Miles stole Peter from him, but in reality, it was Venom that brought them together, making them have complete trust in one another. It extends to Peter and MJ's relationship as well, forcing MJ to confront the fact that she's not happy with her current career, and Peter realizing that he'd been taking her for granted, putting her second. The two finally saying what they've had at the back of their heads, and finally taking those first steps to be able to move forward together. This game has managed to bring all these people together and make them a family, something the comics have been failing to do for years. I mean, come on. Making Peter work for Norman Osborn, the man who murdered his fiancée and made him think his child was stillborn? How the fuck do you come up with that? Where was I? Oh, yeah. I love what Insomniac did with this sequel. Even if the game came out a few days ago, it's already contender for my game of the year. The end credits for the game seems to be setting up the Green Goblin, Doc Ock's return, Carnage, and Silk. There are so many things I'm looking forward to in the next entry. I've never had such confidence in a gaming company before now. Here's hoping. But what are your thoughts on the game? Let me know in the comment section down below. This has been Nesroll, and I hope you all enjoyed. Peace.